color bass flute. Hello nerds! On Patreon, a lot of you asked me about my drop mixdowns and mastering process, so today we're gonna look at that. I'm gonna make a little drop from scratch. I kinda wanna try a before and after, where first I'll just put all the elements there, but not mix anything, and then compress, EQ, etc., the whole thing, explain what I'm doing, and then we can have a side-by-side comparison of before and after. Oh, there's also gonna be a lot of stuff I'll just put on my Patreon, like my project file template, this whole entire project once it's done. You'll all be able to download that after the video if you want to. Alright, let's go. Alright, so this is my default project template. I've talked about this in the previous episode about sidechaining a little bit. Here's just a quick overview. We've got 4 groups: drums, bass, synths, and samples. The samples, synth, and bass group, as well as the cymbals drum rack, which is empty up here, all go through the sidechain audio track down here, where there's shaper box for volume ducking, being triggered by this MIDI trigger track down here, and my ring mod sidechain setup. And then the kick and snare drum rack up here is the only thing that doesn't go through the sidechain group. So for the sake of getting a lot of different material, I thought we'd do like 2 bars of melodic and 2 bars of heavy. And I'm just gonna sketch out my initial idea with just saw waves. Just bear with me here for a second. So I'm gonna go for E minor. Also, I'm using MPE here for pitch bends. I've just started doing that instead of using pitch bend automations or other things, so that's stuff you can find over here in the MPE tab. Each note can have a little pitch modulation on it, which is fun to add little details. Alright, this is all gonna make sense in a second. I kind of have different sounds in my head for each of these tracks. And then before I dive into the sound design for all of these, I'm just gonna grab a kick and a snare. Kinda want something soft but knocky for that part, and then maybe for the heavier part, maybe something like this. I'm just gonna grab a few. I often do this where if I can't decide for a kick or a snare, I'll drag in up to 4 and then I can just easily switch between them in the drum rack. Alright, snare for the first melodic part. I like this one's low end. Yeah, I kind of want something shorter and trappier for the first bit. Cool, let's lay out a drum pattern. So I kind of can't avoid getting into mixing here already a little bit, because I like these snares for different reasons. Like, I like the attack and the low end of this first one, so I'm gonna cut you short. And I kind of like the clappy sound on this one, so let's cut off the low end and give you a little bit of fade in. And I like the tail on this one, so give it a lot of fade in, also cut out the low end. Now you're a little bright, bring that part down, maybe. And maybe the main one that brings the low end and the attack can be EQ'd a little bit, give it a little more oomph. And let's copy this whole thing down to the MIDI trigger for the sidechain. Could have a little one of those. Let's grab some hats real quick. Maybe some really short ones for that first half. Give us some trappy-ish hats. I really just go through this and pick the ones I like. I don't know if I'll end up using them all. And then hats for the heavy part. Add some crash cymbals. Kind of want that first part to be a little dreamier, so I might actually add some delay and reverb on this crash. Oh, I almost started mixing here. No, I want to set everything else up first. I think there could be an interesting little splashy layer on the snare here. And then some heavier cymbals for the heavy part. Alright, so far not a lot has happened. I've grabbed some drums. The only thing I did was the snare layering here with the EQs and the fade-ins for the layered snares on top of the main snare. And then we've got our hats, cymbals. I've added 2 more, one here for the kick and another one for the snare. But there's like nothing happening on these. I just leveled the volumes so that it sounds nice, it sounds okay so far. I'm gonna get on the design for these synths real quick. So I kind of want a saw lead, but I kind of want it to be a little dirty. For that kind of stuff, I've been enjoying to just like turn on some white noise here and then have that maybe modulate the fine tune. Cool. Cool, added a little bit of distortion and compression. That's gonna need some EQing and stuff, but we'll get to that. Mix you together in the distortion over here. And I feel like this one could have like a high fifth or something. And I kind of wish this had some sort of little pitch attack. I don't know if this is the way to do that for this sound. Cool, maybe add a delay to the lead. That's gonna turn off right here. Alright, and let's make the sounds for this heavy bit real quick. I've made some like gun type basses in Serum 2. I'm just going to use this one for now. This is basically the odd profit method with the spectral oscillator and a lot of distortion and convolution reverb. And I'm gonna make a preset pack with a bunch of these too. So for that one, I'm gonna be lazy and just pick a preset, but this one I'm gonna make from scratch because I have a specific idea. Distort that stuff again. Compress again. And then gonna need a little filter. Actually, that might make a little more sense to have this after the distortion. We can get a little pitch envelope on here too. Nice, that general idea is there. This main hit is not exactly what I wanted to be. I'm gonna just go in here and maybe... And then a short little stabby boy for these last three notes. Have you be really high. Fast, snappy LFO. Some sub. Maybe we can do something fun here too, where we have an even faster LFO that just like brings up the sync over here. Again, a little bit of noise. Maybe a little filter. This kind of feels like it wants a comp filter. Distort. Compress. That's pretty good. There's room for a little fill here too, for like another filler bass sound. And I kind of want some background hype synth shot. Still something bass related, but without sub here that just like goes and plays quarter notes the entire time. Because it's all very syncopated and I kind of want something to just keep that jump, jump, jump timing. It could literally just be one of these hits here, maybe. Yeah, kinda. And maybe a frequency shifter can make you a little more interesting. And just really quick to glue it all together, it's gonna add a little rewind sample here. And I think this one can go up in pitch, just so it kind of changes over the course of these 4 hits. Kind of has some slight zomboy flavor now, but I'm fine with that. A little stereo boost. And lastly, down here in the samples group is where I usually add some layers, some hype stuff, something melodic, like a pad in the background or a vocal loop or something. Let's see what we can find. What wonders does the splice folder hold for us today? I'm running. Let's just use that one and see. So this is an A minor, and it's gonna have to go down 5 or up 7. And I kind of just want this to be like some sort of little background pad, so let's just loop. Let's modify this one for like some kind of offbeat thing. The lead was really quiet now, and these vocals are definitely taking away some space there. So I'm just adjusting the volumes, bringing the vocals down a bit, bringing the lead up a bit. And then as like hype layers for the heavy part, there's some like sustained, cool sustained notes here in this folder. You can use all kinds of stuff. You can even just hold like a detuned saw wave, just play it really high at the root note and just mix it in slightly. I just like having this in the back. That's just very loud. I'm gonna make 2 versions of you. One is gonna be an octave up. And just make these pretty quiet. And then some other hype stuff. I've made myself these little like layered loops to put into the background where it's just synths playing notes in the key of whatever this is, like E. Something like that, and just bring that down. Could even try that an octave up. I really like this one. I'm just gonna bring you up to E minor. Or now let's use a different one. And then some more energetic type hype loop for the drop. Just gonna hide these in the back. I'm not doing any EQing or anything, I'm just bringing down the volume on a lot of these. I put this little shout sample here onto the snare. And maybe something like this can just go on the start of the heavy bit. Or on the snare. Yeah, like in shorter maybe. Sorry, I'm a sucker for offbeat chants, just a little bit in the back here. This whole like group of layers and hype stuff here is just very homeopathic, some of it. And this can definitely be blended a lot better with everything else that's going on in the drop right now. So I think now we kind of have everything we need. I'm gonna add maybe 1 or 2 little riser things, like something reversed here at the end to lead into that. Grab a random percussion sound and reverse that here. And maybe 1 little riser thing to lead out of the melodic bit here. That's a really long one. Actually, can we speed you up so you're twice as fast, you rise a little faster. Nice, I think we got everything that we need. Just so this doesn't get boring, I'm just gonna duplicate the whole thing so it's twice as long. By the way, that was just selecting any range here and do Command-Shift-D in Ableton. And then for the second half, I'm just gonna change this pattern a bit. I know using a bunch of these bass samples here is a little bit of cheating because they are somewhat mixed already before I like exported them to then use in a project. Obviously I'd EQ and compress them in a certain way so that they're already sounding pretty good, but it's just these tiny little bits. I think we're fine. All right, this looks like a solid amount of stuff to work with. I'm gonna do an export just like this because then we have a before version, and then I'm gonna go into mixing and try to explain everything in detail. All right, let's get into mixing this stuff. One of my main things that I always start with is the kick and snare. I kind of want to have them sit at 0 right before clipping, and I use Newfangled Saturate as a clipper. And then usually I just bring up the input until the kick drum slightly hits the clipper. And this also makes sure that the snare, for example, here in the drop where I've layered a bunch of snares, those are overall in amplitude way louder than the kick drum. Kick drum hits right at 0, but all these snares together are like much louder. This clipper makes sure that they're both on the same amplitude level. So now kick and snare, no matter what, always hit exactly 0 and don't go over. Some of these heads in the heavy bit are a little loud. It could be because I'm playing 3 at once on these offbeats here. I'm just gonna turn some of these down in volume a little bit. It would make sense to maybe put an EQ onto all these hi-hats here, just to make sure there's not any unnecessary low end, but there already isn't any. A tiny little bit happening here. I'll just put it on there anyway. And then my absolute favorite frequency, right between 3 and 4 kilohertz, somewhere here, is usually always pretty harsh. I like to bring that down a little bit. Now let's look at all these other symbols over here. I might just group these together. Make sure you all go to the group. This group goes to sidechain. Don't be surprised by this little distortion on the one. That's the ring mount sidechain. We can turn that off for now. So there's definitely a little more low end here. Gonna bring down that harsh bit a little bit, maybe compensate by a little bit of freshness. And especially the China symbol here might get its own EQ. And the China might even get an auto pan that just cuts off the tails a little bit on each quarter note. This little splashy type sound can also have a fade out, just make these all a little tighter overall. Sometimes I even take the entire group and I'll just put an auto pan on here, maybe one that's on 1/8 notes and another one that's on quarter notes. Kind of gives them a bit of a rhythm and makes them a little tighter. Maybe not at 100% amount, but... And then this main crash can also get a slightly different EQ. Cool, drums so far are fine, but also when we go into this other stuff, we might notice maybe the cymbals or the hats are too loud or something. Next, I'm just gonna go down here into these hype layers real quick because there's definitely a lot to do here, especially in the heavy drop section. There's a lot of stuff happening in the back that's all very sustained. So let's have a look at this. I like this hypey layer, but you can get an EQ and maybe also an auto pan on quarter notes. Nice, a little stabbier, maybe even a little quieter. Then we've got this thing. that has a lot of warm lows that it doesn't need, and maybe you can have a 16th note. Auto pan at 50%, maybe another one on 8th notes. And probably bring up your highs a bit. Who else we got here? This not very good offbeat chant, but again, EQ that a bit. Got that hit on the snare. That also has unnecessary low end. Maybe this can have a tiny bit of reverb. And this little percussion weird layer thingy here also has low end. And this is very 16th note focused, so maybe let's just make that even tighter with another auto pan. Neat. Now let's have a quick look at these sustained boys here. I think they are nice and quiet in the back, but the high layer has a really annoying frequency here. Again, somewhere around the 3-4 kilohertz mark, in this case 2.7. Still in the outtro range. Bring up the highs instead. Similar treatment for the octave lower layer. Cutting off the lows a little bit there. Then we've got this guy. Just in case you have any low end, gonna cut some of that off. And instead of adding an auto pan here for controlling the tail, I'm just gonna give you a fade out. And then maybe instead, you could even be shorter, but instead we're gonna give you a reverb that's just a little slapback type delay thing, where it's 0 size, 0 decay time, but a long pre-delay, so we get like a... And now I just want to turn up the pre-delay time so that the echo is exactly between each of these notes. Kind of like that. In context, it still sounds like there's some room or some reverb on it, but it's just this very controlled single reflection repetition type thing. All right, let's look at the melodic part here real quick. You have some low end you don't need, and maybe I'm just going to OTT you first, so you're kind of thick and sustained, but then give you some sidechain-esque pumping with the auto pan. This guy's pretty loud. Maybe similar thing here with an auto pan. Bring down this stuff. I'm often just trying to create like an equal level of these frequencies here, where you can see, oh, these are pretty tall, this one's not as tall. I'm gonna try to like bring you guys down to the same level a little bit. Also, I don't like your little, there's like a tiny little click almost at the attack. Just give you a little bit of fade in. Then we've got this cute little vocal here. I'm just gonna give you a little bit of chorus. Make sure you don't have any unnecessary low end either. You can have a delay and be a little dreamy. That just has to stop on this break. Let's look at the synth. You're pretty messy. You have some gnarly low end from this FM from noise thing that I have going here for the kind of distorted sound. So I'm just checking what's the lowest note this is playing. We got the nah, and then the little downwards thing. So I might just put you right here, so we still get all of that, but none of this. And now the bass that plays with this has a lot of stuff going on. I feel like, let's look at the fundamentals of this melody are like in this area. That is like 300, 400, 500 hertz. So I'm just gonna do a notch at 400 hertz here. So now the bass is making space in this frequency region where previously there's all this stuff happening that's overlapping with our synth. I don't know if I like the sidechain pumping on this. Let's just call it a kind of pad. What if you were a staccato-y 8th note kind of thing? I like that. Now it's just the meow meow vocal that's a little much. Maybe you can have the sidechain pump. Cool, so far so good. This riser here I like, but it could have something interesting happening to it. Maybe where we have 16th notes. I love the auto pan. And then this just fades in. It's subtle, but it's cool. Let's copy that to the second half. Let's just see if we can make this bass a little thicker without it overpowering the lead. Add a little multiband dynamics. And maybe you can have a separate sub that like goes direct out. And I initially liked the idea of having this oscillator here doing the fifth. But maybe this can only happen like every bar just in the middle of the bar. I'm just gonna make this thing real quick. That's cool. Now that note kind of just comes in as a layer on the snare. Cool, I'm happy with the melodic bit. Now for the heavy bit. So this might need a separate sub. I'm just gonna give you a direct out sub for now. And then maybe I've made a little rack that tightens up gun basses like this. Something like a transient shaper might help for this. If you have stab, and you like just turn these up, you suddenly have a very tight version where it kind of cuts off the tails a bit. This rack does a similar thing where I'm using the drum bus, but in 3 different frequency bands. So like a 3-band transient enhancer. But what I'm basically doing is I'm using the drum bus here and just playing with the transients knob. And then the post-drive thing is that there is a little saturator on soft clip that just gets mixed in. There's no changes here in drive or anything. And I know initially this sound did have this little reverb tail here from the convolution. And I like it, it still adds some texture, but yes, this transient shaping is cutting that off a little bit. I sometimes prefer doing that by hand afterward. I almost just want to automate this, so as like a reverb throw. So I might just put that in here. This is just very noisy, I can barely hear the meh. So I'm just gonna go a little psycho with this and make this a parallel chain where this is just always on here. But before that, I'm gonna put a utility, and then this is gonna feed audio into the reverb, but only after that initial attack. So now that annoying transient is gone for the reverb tail, and we only have that beautiful resonance. I'm just gonna duplicate that automation, and then I'm gonna need another one after the reverb that actually brings that up, so that we're quiet over here and only in the end here we get that. Maybe just for fun, add a little compressor, but also I will create like another dry chain here that just lets the original through. Now that the reverb is on its own chain, we can even EQ that again and make sure we only get through what we want. We get rid of some of those harsh frequencies again, compensate with a bit of brightness boost. That sounds cool. Now the automation for the other utility at the end here can also be copied over. Maybe not for the last one, because we got that fill. And then one more time over here. And then one final EQ. There's like nonsense mud here that's not really part of the sound. You can kind of see we got the sub here, the harmonic of the sub, like the first one. The second one you can kind of see over here. And then the me ring is right here. And between those, there's not really... That's not really part of the sound. Don't need anything in that area. And maybe slight brightness boost. Cool, I'm happy with that sound. Next one. This one's gonna need some work. Let's start with a soft sine saturator. And even an EQ before that. Again, we got our sub, which I think does... I'm just gonna go ahead and boost it like this. And then most of this noisy top stuff is happening here. So again, there's an area here around 300 Hertz where that's not really anything important happening in the sound. Can quite aggressively cut that. Then the soft sine saturator crunches it up a bit. Compressor here makes it a little punchier. Overall, it's a little quieter than the main yoink here, so I'm gonna bring you up. The main snare here, in the heavy part, is definitely pretty loud. This brightness layer is nice, I'm gonna bring that down 1 decibel, but also I do want to bring up like the snare in this trappy bit. First of all, can we tune you? Maybe you can have a tiny bit of reverb. And there might be a fun layer, maybe just a clap, honestly. Nice, okay, now we've got a slightly reverbed clap here that goes on top of the trap snare. Almost for dramatic effect, I want the second trap snare to have a little reverse fade in. So I'm just going to record that on an audio track on resampling. Cut off the main snare here, put you before that, cut you here, reverse you. Now that's very quiet, gotta bring that up a bit. And maybe fade you out right before. Nice, and just in case, this can also get its own EQ. A little bit of harshness here that I just want to get rid of. Make sure you happen again in the second part. Overall, the drums are a little bit louder than everything, but I'm okay with that for now. Your pitch, I'm not happy with the pitch of this little hype guy. This refill is okay, might need a little EQ. Similar thing here with some low mids that aren't really necessary. And there's some annoying high end here too. Kind of right there. Now for this guy, let's bring up the classics, EQ, compression, and saturation. Similar stuff here. The high frequencies are over here, our sub is over there. Doesn't really need these mids. Can we change you to soft sign, just make you overall a little more aggressive. Boost the sub into the distortion for some slight crunch. Oh, and we've got that reverse thing under it here that I added that has a lot of unnecessary low end. That can really just be something like that. Could even be pitched up, probably. Yeah, that feels nicer. This little bass fill here sounds nice, it's just a little quiet compared to the rest of the basses. And you could also have that slapback reverb kind of echoey thing. 0 size, 0 decay, 0 shape. Pre-delay up. One more EQ on the end of the chain of this guy. Just to make you a little fresher while controlling the harshness. And this guy too. It's a little much in that area. Nice. We've pretty much mixed every element a little bit and everything's fitting a little more together. Everything sounds a little tighter. Nothing has unnecessary low end that it doesn't need. And then usually the next step for me would be some group processing. I rarely do anything on like the bass, synth, or samples group, but I have 2 things that I like to do. Obviously one is mastering, or we can also turn the ring mount sidechain back on. I just turned that off so that you wouldn't hear its artifacts when I'm soloing something. That main snare is still pretty loud, but I think in context later this is going to be fine. I might bring the entire bass group up by 1 decibel. And this lead as well, and our main yoink 1 more decibel. Oh, this guy hasn't really gotten any treatment. Bit messy of a dude anyway. I think just for dramatic effect, this one shouldn't have any sub, because we've got sub rolling through this entire bit here. And then that's kind of like a cool little break before this guy comes in with sub again. So just trying to play with when the sub is playing and when it's not. Cool, so far so good. And then one final thing I like to do at the end often is this sidechain group that everything's running through. That's not kick or snare. I might have a little multiband compressor on here, but I prefer using the FabFilter Pro MB. And then I'll have 1 band here for the sub that has a very hard knee. And then this is just to level the sub so that between all these different bass sounds, it somewhat stays at the same level. As you can see, the sub in the heavy bit is a lot stronger than the sub in the melodic bit, so this is kind of evening that out. If overall that leads to too much reduction in sub volume, we can just boost the gain of it overall a bit. And then we can do something similar up here for the high bands, maybe one that is from 7,000 to all the way up, and one that's sort of a little sitting in this harsh range that I don't like between, say, 1.5 and 7. And then one down here for the low mids-ish area. And I don't want these to be compressing the entire time. I'm gonna set the threshold all the way to 0. So they're not reacting yet, and then I'm bringing this down until I see these bands reacting sometimes to like certain peak loudness moments. Now it's almost just leaving that melodic synth completely alone. Let's turn the ring mod sidechain back on, let's turn everything else back on. This main first bass still gets a little buried. Might just be worth boosting the highs a little bit in the serum patch. Could probably do it with an EQ here too, but if I can do it here, why not? This convolution here still does add some kind of nice noisy tail at the end. Maybe there's a way to control you a bit more, yeah, with an envelope like this. I don't want to mess too much with the actual characteristics of the sound, so our before and after doesn't sound too weird. I'm gonna compress you one more time. For some reason, this third time it does the reverse reverb is a little louder than the other. Did I do something wrong here? Oh yeah, this is the automation that lets it into the reverb. So you kind of have to be on 0 here, my friend. Nice, that's more consistent. Cool, we have mixed this down. There's no mastering happening yet. We are clipping a bit. Drums are still a bit strong, but that is fine. After the mastering, this should all sound nice and together. But I'm gonna save this and I'm gonna export this version too as after mixing. And then we're gonna have one more version after mastering. So for quote unquote mastering, I really don't do a lot. I often just put on Ozone, current version Ozone 11 that I have here. And I usually only use an EQ, the multiband dynamics, and the maximizer, though the maximizer I don't really use. I turn it off, but I use the gain match. Let me show you what I mean. So right now, I've just thrown this on. These are my settings here. I can put a preset file to this on my Patreon as well. And what I've got going on here is some compression for the lows and the low mids, stronger compression for and even stronger compression for the very highs. The ratios here is also the ratio for the subs really strong, the low mids is pretty fluffy, and then it gets stronger for the higher frequencies again. And if I play this back now, these lines are showing me that there's a lot of compression going on. That's actually too much. I don't want that much. So I'm gonna turn down the input gain. Until these are just like slightly moving, like maybe down to -3, -4. And then often to let through some more highs, because obviously with 7 to 1, this stuff up here gets quite compressed. I just like to use the parallel down here and just bring through the uncompressed signal a little bit. Slightly similar stuff for these high mids, maybe just 90%. And then for the lows here, I might give the sub band 1 extra decibel after compression. And then in the EQ, we've got a mid and a side EQ. Side EQ just makes sure that there's no sub coming through on the sides. And sometimes I like to brighten the sides a little bit while making sure they don't get harsh. Yeah, that stuff's all fine. Mids, usually we've already done so much mixing here, I don't think we'll need to do much here. That first yoink bass really gets lost in the mids. We can barely hear it there. It seems to mostly live in the sides. Maybe we can do something about that in here real quick, where I kind of want to do it in the serum patch. I could use a utility right after serum and just bring down the width a little bit. But that doesn't sound too good. I kind of want to see if I can do this here. Let's run this yoinky part of the sound through one of the effects buses. And then here we could use a utility and make it mono here before it runs through the whole distortion with the sub and everything. Maybe not make it completely mono, but just a little bit. Oh, actually, the polarity inversion here actually did quite a lot. So I will keep it like that. That sounds good. Now the yoinkiness of it is almost a little too loud. And even though it became a lot more mono, our little reverb throw definitely adds some width in these moments. Cool. Also, the kick has all this low-end tail here, which I don't think it needs because the sub of these basses is like kind of immediately taking over after the sidechain. Nice. I like that more. Snare is still a bit loud overall. I might just bring all of the samples that are part of the snare down 2 decibels. Nice, that feels a little bit better. Back to Ozone. We've got a little bit of compression going on, and then once, yep, EQing was fine. I don't see anything wrong with the mids, really. Maybe you could overall, I'm just gonna try this. I rarely do this. In this case, I think because I've just overall scooped everything quite a lot, it can just have a little more presence in the mids. In the mids of the mids. Nice, that looks good. And then I used the maximizer to initially, first, let's just bring this up, make it loud. This is gonna get a little loud now. Usually up to where I hit -2 RMS in Ozone up here. And then I use the gain match and turn off the maximizer. So now what it does is it just boosts it by 8 decibels after the dynamics. And it actually doesn't limit it, it's gonna clip. Maybe overall a little bright in a certain area here. I think it might be this. Could even bring this down a little bit here too for more mud removal on the sides. Nice, that is pretty tight and aggressive. I'm happy with this. I must save this as after mastering and export one more bounce. As a little once over, we have leveled everything on the volume side so that everything's kind of like in its right place. All these background elements are quiet enough where they don't overpower anything, but they still make up good amount of background hype. We've processed the basses and the synths with distortion, compression, some tightening with transient shapers, some reverb throws that are very scientifically accurate here, some specific EQs for even just the reverb throw, some EQs to take out low muddy stuff, some harsh stuff between 3 and 4 kilohertz, and then often compensating that by boosting the brightness a little bit. Also cutting low end on stuff that doesn't need to have any low end, and using lots of auto pans for rhythmical elements to make them a little more punchy, a little tighter, which also brings them a little more into the background. Especially all these cymbals have gotten really tight. This one crash here might still be the one thing that right here is a little too present. Some final adjustments to some of these basses. The reverb throw itself is a little loud. Good thing it's its own chain in this rack, so we can just adjust the volume of that chain. Nice, I'm happy with this. It might be a little bright in some parts. Just going to bring the parallel compression of the high frequencies in Ozone from 50 to 60%, and save and export one more time, and then let's do a comparison. All right, comparison time. I know I'm not super accurate here because I exported the before version and the after mixing version with clipping, but the master version is clipping too because that's like part of my mixing process for drops. But right now they kind of all have the same perceived loudness, so it's fine. So I'm gonna just start switching back and forth. So here is the before version. And then after mixing. Drums a bit strong, and then after mastering. Drums and bass is kind of a little more together in that one. I'm gonna just do some quicker switching around. Nice. Good results. Not my absolute best work, but I'm happy with this. But regardless, I'm gonna give you this project file and you can have fun with it and analyze it. I'll give you all three actually. The one before mixing, the one after mixing, and the one after mastering. I forgot one more important thing. So often after I have made an export with the master and everything, I go into Rekordbox and here I will import the file and then A/B it with other tracks from other people, or just look at the waveform and see what it looks like and how the color scheme of Rekordbox makes it look like. If it's super red, there might be a little too much sub. I also like to zoom in and see what does the kick phase into the sub phase look like. Usually the ring mod sidechain actually makes sure that it's pretty good most of the time. But also when A/Bing this with some other stuff, I noticed the sub is quite loud. This is all looking pretty red. I went back into the project one last time. First of all, I did fix this main guy a little bit. I just went into Serum and cut off some low end here on the spectral oscillator before. And then if I cut this off, like that sounds cooler overall and also fits into the mix a little bit better. And after comparing it to some stuff in Rekordbox and looking at the waveform, seeing it's overall pretty red, I realized maybe it doesn't need that much sub. So this 1 dB boost here, I took that down back to 0 and then gave it 1 more dB here in the maximizer before turning it off again with a gain match. So by taking away some sub here before, we've sort of gained a little room for more loudness. So I compensated that by making the whole thing 1 decibel louder. And now I've got the new version, Project After Mastering 2, little thicker overall, little more purple because the high frequencies kind of change the color of this. I use both this color scheme and my ears as kind of like a mixing reference. And now with this version, I'm a lot more happy. And I feel like it's just overall a little more balanced. And there you have it, a fun little mixing exercise. I might do something like this every once in a while because there might be other situations where, depending on the drop and the genre and the vibe of the whole thing, some mixing decisions might be different. And this is not the perfect way to do it. This is just how I do it, and I wanted to let you know how I do it. Again, find the stuff from this episode on my Patreon, link below, and see you all next time. Bye!